And we are back, and we just finished watching 2021's Passing, currently streaming on Netflix. It's rated PG-13 with a runtime of 1 hour and 38 minutes. This is the directorial debut of actress Rebecca Hall, who also writes the screenplay. This is based on Nella Larsen's 1929 novella, Passing, and tells the story of two friends who meet later on in life as adults and how their lives intertwine. What did you think of the film?
I thought it was okay. I feel like the story, I don't know, it felt kind of branching and almost disjointed. I don't feel like I got like a nice fluid story. There seemed to be like a lot of
stuff going
on, a lot of themes that were, it's sort of like, oh, we're going to explore this now, but it didn't really happen that way. And then it was like, we're jumping onto this theme and we're jumping onto this theme. So while I thought the story, the idea for the story was interesting, and I thought that some of the paths that we were led down were also interesting, it just, I don't know, it didn't come together for me.
Okay, fair enough. So I want to preface by saying that a couple of weeks ago, maybe, CBS Sunday Morning did a short piece on this actual story, and they interviewed Rebecca Hall, and I found it very fascinating because I didn't know that she's biracial, and that came up in the interview, and she talked about how this movie was dedicated to her mother, who struggled with racial identity and maybe had like a little bit of self-loathing, and it really touched me, and I could see why she would pick this particular story to tell. Having said that, I enjoyed the film. I could see where this might not play for everyone. I don't think this is going to be everyone's cup of tea, but I think that it's extremely powerful. I enjoy that the main protagonists are women and the male characters are almost secondary. Well, they are in a lot of ways. They don't get as much screen time as Ruth Negga and Tessa Thompson, but the bulk of the story is through Irene's lens, and Tessa Thompson does a fantastic job of playing this sort of subtle creature.
She's very conflicted.
She's very conflicted. And I thought that was interesting because
on like multiple fronts.
Yes, I think there's a lot going on here. And I think one of the things is there does seem to be sort of a sexual undertone between the two actresses, no?
I definitely picked that up.
Especially from Irene to Claire.
You know, and this was sort of one of the things I was going on about, where we're going off on sort of different themes, and then they sort of like get dropped and we're on a different theme. And this was one of those themes where, yeah, there was some sort of
actions
of an attraction between, or I would say it was more coming from Irene to Claire than it was from Claire to Irene. Claire's story was pretty straightforward. I mean, Irene was definitely the point of view character for this movie. So you definitely got a greater view of what was going on in her mind. Irene, her story was also there, but it was more straightforward. For Irene was, I'm sorry, Claire's story was more straightforward, and like for Claire, it was almost like regret. Well, it was regret.
Yeah, for sure.
She made a life for herself, and in order to make that life for herself, she had to live a lie. And she seemed fine with it up until she reconnects with Irene. And after that, she realizes what she's doing and what she's missed, and you could see it has really affected her to the point where she's almost
obsessed with Irene's life.
Obsessed with it. She wishes she had Irene's life.
Yes.
Like this is definitely a movie about jealousy, because
there's also I think the bigger thing is the racial identity, right?
No, there's a racial identity, the whole thing, but there is a theme of jealousy going on between Irene and Claire, and it's coming from both directions.
Both directions, yeah.
Where Claire is jealous of Irene's life, it's like a jealousy that a wistful jealousy, or like I said, something of regret, something that she wished she could have the life that Irene has. As the story progresses, it's almost like Irene, like there's the whole other story of her husband mentioning racial violence that's occurring in what was it, Alabama or something. I think it was I don't know if that was like a real thing or if that was just like a sort of a reference to like Emmett Till or like that. I don't know if the characters they were describing were the actual thing, but the circumstances seemed similar.
Well, this is before, because it's supposed to take place in the 1920s.
But it's roughly the same thing. I'm sure that...
lynchings have been going on for a very, very long time in this country.
There wasn't just the one.
Right.
And Irene doesn't want the father saying this about that, and she seems to get genuinely upset by it. And the husband's being like, listen, there's terrible shit going on
in this country.
Our kids... should know about it. We've tried to shield them, but guess what? It's coming for them. Mm-hmm. And for Irene, she doesn't. I don't know if she doesn't want to believe it. She doesn't want to register it. She says, "I just want them to be happy." And I think part of that comes from the fact that Irene is capable of passing for white, which she does.
Yes.
So she is not experiencing the world that her husband and her children are,
because they're darker,
experiencing, that they're currently experiencing.
Yeah.
And so she just does, it's almost like, well, it's not that bad for me. Not that she ever says that. I just don't think she believes it 100%.
Well, I didn't get that. I think she was really desperately trying to shield them from the horrors, because there's one point where she says that they have... that right now they're children and they should enjoy that, and they have the rest of their lives when they're adults to really learn about that stuff. I'm glad you brought that up, because I was going to say, thought it was interesting watching the film, because I do agree with you. There are threads of jealousy on both sides with these women. And it's interesting because when the film opens up, it's through, again, Irene's perspective, and she's shopping and she is passing for something that she is not. And she does it very much on the sly. She does it very secretively.
Yeah,
I think it's interesting.
She never looks at anybody in the eye or maintains facial contact too much
for too long. Right.
She's basically just going by the superficial aspect that her skin is very light.
And
it's Tessa Thompson, or her features. They definitely.
She could pass for mixed race.
She could pass. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She could pass for mixed race. If you actually really looked at her, you would probably pick up, oh, she's black.
Right.
Or she's partially black or whatever. But like you said, she's slick about it. She wears the hat. She keeps her head down. And she
engaged too long.
Exactly. And where are we going with this?
Well, no, I was going to say
that she in the beginning of the movie she passes.
My point was going to be that it's interesting because there's that scene after this that we're talking about where she's in bed with her husband, Brian, and she's almost like angry at Claire, right? And it's like, but you're doing the same thing. Not in the scale that Claire is doing it, obviously, but you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but you are also engaging in the bigotry of her husband. Her husband's nickname for her was Nig.
Oof,
because he's like, oh, you seem to be getting darker as you get older. Mm-hmm. He clearly didn't have any clue that his wife was actually
a black woman.
A black woman, but it's disgusting. And then they have the discussion. It's like, oh, well, do you like black people?
Right.
And he's like, oh, it's not that I don't like them. I hate them.
Right.
Like, what?
Yeah, that was very jarring. That whole sequence was very jarring. And you could feel the tension off of Tessa Thompson. She does a fantastic job with this film. And you feel it. You feel it. And then it permeates and it keeps going. And then there's that scene in the bedroom with her husband where she's angry to have been put in that position to almost like be found out for being a fraud in a way. And I think that was one of the reasons why she was still harboring this resentment towards Claire, where she didn't answer the letter. Claire made it a point to go to Irene's house to confront her.
Right, because at that point, Claire, like we said, when Claire meets Irene again, it's almost like it's like a window into a world that she abandoned. She had long forgotten.
Yeah.
And a big part of her desperately wanted to be part of that world again.
Exactly.
And she didn't even realize it until she saw
Irene.
Right. And after that point, it was just like, I need to do this.
Right. And she was constantly with Irene.
She was constantly with her, constantly seeking her out, going to her house.
Ingratiating herself with her own family.
To the maid, her husband,
the children.
All of her friends.
Yes.
And like I said, honestly, that to me, that's where, like initially there is some sort of attraction there. Like I would say after that moment, after that initial anger, but after Claire shows up at the house and it's almost like they reach like an understanding of one another and they hang out more. There, you could see that there is
the first night that when they go to the dance, and then afterwards when Irene and Brian are in bed, she's like, "Oh, I'm glad she came."
Yeah. And then there's the moment at the dance itself where she reaches out and grabs her hand, and it's like an interesting moment there where you think, "Oh, this is not only about
racial identity,
but also sexual identity." But then that kind of gets dropped, and it's still the racial identity thing, but now there's also like some sort of, I kept feeling that this jealousy. I mean, there's the jealousy that Claire has for Irene's life, but that never felt malicious.
No. It was almost like wistful longing. Like,
it was almost I wish I could have had this.
Right. I could be.
Almost like an admiration.
Right. Like
because
she
jealousy
really
of that
felt
vein.
like Irene had the happy life.
Yeah, that she actually says you did it the right way.
Right.
And then there's the jealousy that Irene has for Claire. And I get that feeling because I just got the feeling that Claire wished that
Irene,
I keep messing their names up. That Irene wished that she was white.
I could see that. I think it definitely would make life
not
easier.
only that, but the anger, like because she progressively got more angry at Claire, and I could see that happening because it's sort of like you have everything that I would ever want, really.
Right.
This great life. There's no danger of being looked down on. I don't doubt that I think at some point she did love her husband. I don't know if she loved her husband anymore. There was a coldness there.
Yeah, it wasn't
like there was nothing going on in the bedroom to the point where the husband even mentions that.
Yeah.
It was just like shop's closed.
Yeah.
And then she starts with Claire coming around more.
It's almost like she pushes Claire and Brian together.
Yeah, you get that impression, and not only is like pushing, but she starts getting mad at that.
Right. But she orchestrated.
But she sort of orchestrated, and it's very ambiguous as to if there was something going on.
Right. That's never really fully.
It's never really fully
realized.
I mean, you might get hints for one or the other.
Right. A look.
A look, leaning forward, whispering in each other's ear. The fact that
Claire was very touchy-feely with Brian.
I don't know. I didn't
get
it.
Not overly touchy-feely, but she seemed very familiar with him.
Maybe. I got the impression that she was friendly with her. She was extremely charming. Everybody was charmed by her. And I get the feeling that that's another thing that Irene
didn't like about Claire.
That Irene was
jealous,
getting upset about or getting jealous about, because she charmed all her friends. And by the end, when they're in that final party, Irene is like, it's like she's at a funeral.
Right.
They're like, oh, you don't laugh anymore? And she becomes way stiffer as the movie goes on.
Progresses, yeah.
And just how demeaning she's not very nice to her maid.
Yeah, she's very snappish and
she's
abrupt.
very snappish, very abrupt. It's like she wants everything to be very prim and proper. And even in the way she speaks.
Yes.
Very stiff.
Yeah.
A very stiff manner of speaking. And in the beginning, I thought, oh, that's just, I guess they're trying to like ape maybe a 20s style of talking.
Yeah. But everybody
else, like in the beginning, Claire also talked in a kind of a stiff manner. But as time went on,
she let herself.
The way she was talking was more loose, more casual. Mm-hmm. And Claire just got even more and more rigid and elocution. It was almost like, it was like she was just shy of busting out with an English accent.
Yeah. Which wouldn't have been so far, because since Tessa Thompson is, I think she's British.
Yeah, I think her normal accent is English or Australian or...
I think she's British.
British. I don't know. But yeah, she becomes more stiff. Yeah, it's definitely like a jealousy out of anger towards Claire. Mm-hmm. And
oh no, we're wrong. She was born in Los Angeles, California.
I'm baffled. I don't know.
I
don't know what her accent.
Amazing. I know she does an amazing British accent. I thought she was British.
But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of ambiguousness as far as if there's an affair going on. Maybe, I mean, the husband doesn't seem to be very possessive of her. When they're at parties, she's talking with this one and that one. That one guy seemed to be completely
Hugh enamored of her.
No, Hugh, but also I don't even know if that guy got
the guy that was dancing with her.
Yeah, the guy. Did he even get a character name? I don't even know.
No.
He never. I don't think he had a line of dialogue. But at the end, she looks like Irene looks at that guy, and he's like.
Yeah.
Devastated.
Yeah.
I don't want to. I mean, we're not giving away spoilers or anything, but yeah, it's a drama. Tragedy ensues.
Yeah. So I would agree with you. There was a lot of themes, just bouncing around here. It's a little unfortunate that a lot of it wasn't carried over. And it's funny because it's not a long movie, but it's not a short movie. It clocks in at an hour and 39 minutes. But I think that, having said that, I think it still works. I think it's an impressive debut for Rebecca Hall as a writer-director. I think she made really great casting choices. I think she made really great stylistic choices. Like, it felt like 1920s Harlem.
Yeah,
even the music, everything about it, just really gorgeous. I love the idea of the black and white. I've always said I feel like there's also it just feels like an added element of class when you see something that's black and white, especially when it's like this crisp, clear black and white where you see just everything. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
it's an absolutely gorgeous film. The costumers,
it lends itself to the time period.
It definitely lends itself to the time period, and just the whole idea of race, right? Light and dark and stuff like that. So that definitely adds a layer to it. And I think the costuming, the set direction, the art direction, all of that, just cinematography, just really came together lovely. I also thought it was interesting, I guess it's part of the editing. There were scenes where it started very blurry and then it would focus. So it's almost like this ambiguity, right? You don't know what you're seeing at first, especially in the beginning, where it's like camera's focused on a sidewalk, but it's very blurry. And you see people walking by, and then it starts focusing and you see things more clearly, right? So I don't know if that's a metaphor for this kind of the story itself, because there is a lot of ambiguity here. There's ambiguity about race. You don't know initially, I guess, that Claire is a black woman. And the first time that you see Claire, she's like this absolutely gorgeous, stunning creature in this sunlight with this beautiful skin and this
blonde
hair and this beautiful dress. And the way Tessa Thompson interprets Irene, she's just like this kind of introverted, I mean, she's beautiful, right? But she's kind of like this introverted, dowdy plain Jane persona.
Yeah, she's definitely downplaying
her beauty.
Her beauty, yeah.
Although it's funny because then there's that scene with the husband where he's like, I like my women darker. Mm-hmm. She's fawning over Claire's good looks, and the husband's like, okay, I guess she's pretty, but she's not for me.
Right.
And then there is definitely this other subtle sexual subcontext, right? Because the letter that Brian originally reads that Irene didn't want to read, there seemed to be like a little bit more than just friendship there.
I mean, I could see how that would be interpreted that way, but I did not feel that was
the intention.
Yeah.
No, I agree. Ultimately, there wasn't, but I do agree with you that Claire definitely wanted the life that Irene had carved for herself.
Yes.
She definitely wanted to be liberated and free to love, but she made a choice. She made a choice that she thought bettered her life, when in actuality, it really didn't.
A prison.
Yeah, it was a prison. Even if it was a golden prison, it was still a prison. And I think on Irene's side, having Claire come back into her life made her have to deal with certain things. And I think that Irene just wasn't ready for that. Mm-hmm. And it's almost like she implodes while all of this stuff is going on. And then in the final sequence, she's almost like shell-shocked and just kind of operating on fumes, basically, right? This whole tragedy happens and she's just, I don't know how to describe it.
Like I said, it's ambiguous.
I mean, the whole thing is, right?
One thing I when I'm thinking about it, like we were deciding if what was there any sort of intentional, I'm trying to say this without spoiling anything. Was there any intention in
malice?
Yes. Was there an intention of malice? And that situation reminded me of an earlier situation, the situation with the teapot, and what she says when the teapot drops. Because the guy, what's his name? Hudson?
Hugh.
He says,
covers for her.
He covers, I must have bumped into you.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, no, you didn't. I've just been trying to get rid of this thing, and now I have the perfect excuse for it.
Right.
That was like, thinking about that's like some pretty heavy-handed foreshadowing.
Yeah. Another scene that I thought was pretty brilliantly done was when they're at the dance and he's kind of being dismissive about Claire, Hugh, and she kind of gets defensive, and she says, "We're all trying to pass for something."
Yeah,
which I thought was interesting, and his reaction to that as well. I think he's taken aback that she kind of is assertive enough to give him kind of grief about him maybe being weird about her friend, because at that point she's very protective of Claire, and that's right before the whole hand holding thing.
I don't know why my mind went there, but when she said we're all trying to pass for something, I thought he took that as a dig, meaning
that he's there.
She's trying to pass for white, and you're trying to pass for a straight man.
Oh, is that right?
That's the impression I got, and he was sort of like, oh, yeah, because he's just like sitting there, and his wife is dancing with every dude in the place, and either he's like into cuckoldry, or he just doesn't care because he'd rather. Oh, and he was talking about the looks of the guys too.
Yeah. I thought he might secretly have a thing for Irene.
Hugh?
Hugh, yeah.
No. I didn't get that at all.
Okay. All right, you could be right. I wasn't.
Not at all. No.
So, what do you think?
Like numbers?
Yeah, 1 to 10. What would you give this movie?
I'd probably give it a 6.5.
6.5. I too.
Like I said,
give it a 6.5.
It was interesting. Like I said, the ambiguity, I don't mind that sometimes. It makes you like try and pick out clues and try and figure out what's really going on. That part intrigues me a bit. I just felt like there was a lot of threads that were started that were just kind of dropped. I think the story probably could have gone through some rewrites maybe to streamline things and jettison some of the stuff that was a bit distracting. As far as the performances go, I thought Ruth Negga was great. Tessa Thompson was good. The really stiff language, especially from Tessa Thompson, sort of made me, I don't know, it may have taken me out of the movie a little bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, it served a purpose, especially in the case of Ruth Negga, because, like I said, in the beginning, her language was very stiff and proper, and then as the film went on, it became more casual. Mm-hmm. So you could see that she was sort of loosening up and embracing having a normal life. Mm-hmm. Whereas Tessa Thompson, it's like I said, if anything, it became even more stiff. And it was like she was desperately trying to maintain order. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, I don't know. I don't know if I like that mechanic of the movie. Mm-hmm. I think they could have probably done away with that and just had everybody speak a little bit more casually. I don't think it added anything to the movie that could have been shown in any other way. Yeah, so I'd say overall 6.5.
You know what? I'm going to change my number. I'm going to say a 7. I really appreciated the story told from the female perspective. I really enjoyed both main protagonists. I think Ruth Negga was sensational. I thought Tessa Thompson was great. The look of the movie is outstanding. The cinematography was beautiful. The costuming was fantastic. I love that house. I love the old wood in that house. That house was gorgeous. I even liked the male characters. I thought Andre Holland as Brian was great. It's not too low tier on this. Like he plays an important part in this, but it's also the ambiguity there. Did he have a relationship with Claire?
Yeah, there was
this ambiguity, and it's interesting because in the beginning he starts as not being a fan of Claire, but I think the more they interact, he really comes to like her, and she definitely likes him. And that the interplay between the actors was really, really, really well done. The maid too, just how Claire ingratiates herself with her almost as an equal, not as a superior, which is what Irene's role was, and she definitely stressed that. Was not, like you said, she was kind of unkind at one point.
And the maid was not like, didn't really kowtow to her. It was just like, do you need me to get you anything, or do you need me to get you something? Like when she saw like Claire just like, Irene just lingering around the kitchen. Yeah, and also and Irene, like when the maid wasn't there to watch the kids, and why isn't she here? And her husband's basically like, well, she's got a family too, you know. Yeah. She's not a slave. Yeah. She's our maid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the conversation about race was not as explored, or the conversation about lynchings, I guess, in terms of race wasn't really explored like it could have been. I feel like this movie could have benefited. I agree with you. Maybe a rewrite and maybe like 20 minutes more.
I thought the runtime was fine. I just feel like if they had streamlined the story points a bit, you could have dedicated that time that was sort of, I'm not going to say wasted, but it was sort of extraneous. Yeah. And you could have dedicated that more to the story at hand. Or the core story, which is the relationship between the two women and how the concept of passing is viewed by both of them, mm-hmm. and how one almost, I would say, looked at it as like a curse that she willingly participated in, but now is paying for it. And the other one sort of views it as something that maybe she wished she had done. It was like, that's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think a rewrite, and if they had streamlined the story, they probably would have had time to develop other things. So that might have helped the story along. Again, I don't think this is for everybody. I mean, I'm still going to stick with my 7. I think Rebecca Hall did a great job. I mean, it was just a lovely piece. And just, again, having seen her interview prior to this about what the story meant to her and how it related to her own personal familial experiences was really powerful to me. So I was carrying that in the back of my head while I was watching this film. But there was other themes in this that definitely crowded the piece that I wish had been explored better or differently in lots of ways. But I still think it's a worthwhile film. It's an interesting film, and it definitely opens up a lot of conversation as to racial identity, sexual identity, just racism as a whole. The Alex Skarsgård character was not a nice person, and probably run of the mill in 1929 America.
Yeah, absolutely.
So seeing it from that vantage point too is sort of like a slice of life in that respect. But yeah, I mean, if you haven't seen it, I recommend passing. Currently streaming on Netflix. What would you say? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. I wouldn't say go out of your way to go watch it, but if you're cruising through all the choices on Netflix and it's like, and
you want to see something
you're
new,
not finding anything, give it a shot.
Yeah.
You may like it.
I think the performances alone make it a standout. I think it definitely raised the number for me, at least.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it from us, and we will come back with another review soon. Good night.
Good night.